Hey everyone, you're listening to Fantasy Uptick. I'm Jeremiah Blue, and today we're going to be talking about the Detroit Lions. I'm going to be breaking down basically the fantasy implications of all the different players from Matt Ryan, Kerryon Johnson, Swift, Galladay, Jones. I'll even talk a little bit of Amendola, and of course, Hawkinson, the tight end, the first round pick from last year. So, right off the bat, let's just talk about what is going to be different this year than last year. The offensive line lost Glass. Now, I think that's going to be a huge loss for them. So, while it was ranked 11th overall in PFF grades, I don't think that they're necessarily going to get worse because they brought in Big V to play right tackle, which was a weakness for him last year. And they drafted Jonah Jackson, who fell to them in the third round, which is huge. So I think the offensive line is going to be more of a lateral move. Obviously, they still got Decker and Ragnow there. So I think they might be a little bit better in pass protection, but they're not going to be able to run as good, which is nothing new. The Detroit Lions never freaking run. But they did draft Deandre Swift to mix in with Kerryon Johnson. Now, Kerryon Johnson had a bad year last year, just overall production-wise, but Kerryon Johnson's still a very talented running back. So if you're like in these dynasty leagues, obviously Kerryon Johnson's stock took a big hit with Deandre Swift coming to town. That being said, I don't actually think that Deandre Swift's going to be the better back, especially not year one. I think maybe down the road, Deandre Swift, maybe next year, Deandre Swift has a long way to go in pass protection to be one of those every down backs. Kerryon Johnson, of all the backs that had a running back drafted behind them, so like Damian Williams, you had Marlon Mack, a couple of other dudes that had like some big name running backs kind of drafted behind him. Kerryon Johnson is the best of those guys. Kerryon Johnson's an actually good running back. In 2 years, when his contract's up, somebody's going to pay him to come in and be the feature back or at least compete for a role to be the feature back because that's the kind of running back he is. So I don't think for 1 second Swift's going to go in there and just take all the carries. I think Matt Patricia has a plan to have two very good running backs going about 50-50. I mean, Kerryon Johnson obviously has shown that he can't stay healthy, but if you mix him up, take a couple of those carries away. So honestly, I think the stock obviously dropped for both of them because if you were doing drafts or rookie drafts prior to the NFL draft, which you shouldn't be doing, but I mean, a lot of people were doing like mock drafts, Deandre Swift was considered one of the best running backs. A lot of people had him as their number one. I actually had him at my number 4 or 5-ish between him and J.K. Dobbins. So I already thought Kerryon Johnson was a better running back right now than Deandre Swift because Kerryon Johnson can pass block. Kerryon Johnson's one of those guys that's kind of good at everything. He's not overly fast, but he can pass block, he can run people over, he can be a receiver out of the passing game. So what are the differences here? Well, between the tackles, Kerryon Johnson's a better running back than Deandre Swift. Deandre Swift isn't like a power back. And there's a couple of games, even in college, Florida game pops to my head that you were watching Swift and he just can't break tackles sometimes. Now he's elusive. That offensive line in Georgia was great. So he's able to make long runs because and he's got great vision, he's got great cuts, but like as far as like once people get their hands on him, he's not really much of a tackle breaker, not in the elite level like some of these other guys that came out in the same draft class. Now Kerryon Johnson on the other hand, he is good. He can break those tackles. So I think the first, second down, try to grind it out running back is going to be Kerryon Johnson. Kerryon Johnson's better at that. They both can do it to some degree. And they both can catch and be a receiver out of the backfield to some degree. I think Deandre Swift excels in that department where we're talking about taking it to the house and catching the ball out of the backfield. But Kerryon Johnson is by far and away a much better pass blocker, and I think that this team is going to be as good as Matt Stafford in that passing game is going to be. Granted, the defense obviously was terrible last year. They did a lot of things in the draft and through free agency to improve the defense. So I think the defense will be improved, but I'm definitely not drafting them in any kind of fantasy league. So let's go to Matthew Stafford. So like I said, I think that the offensive line is going to be it's going to be a lateral move from last year. I think it might be a better pass blocking offensive line than it is going to be a run blocking as opposed to last year where it was in the middle. I think it took a step back in run blocking, but it might have stepped forward in pass blocking due to the fact that they brought in a right tackle who can pass block out of Philly. Now, granted, he hasn't had a lot of starts, so we don't actually know what we're getting with Big V. I mean, he comes from that Philadelphia offense, and the few times that he got to play, because obviously he's behind Lane Johnson, which is probably the best right tackle in football, and Jason Peters, who's one of the top left tackles in football. So it's hard for him to get on the field, but when he got those opportunities, he did excel in them, and of course he got paid by Detroit, so they believe in him. So I have to assume that he's going to be an improvement from last year's right tackle, which I do assume that's going to happen. And then again, Jonah Jackson's probably going to start at on one of the guard spots, and everything out of the combine was he was the best pass blocking guard in this year's draft, which obviously fell to the third round, so he lacks something in the run game, but if he can protect Matt Ryan, this is a passing league, so that's a great pick. They traded up to get him, so I expect him to start at one of those positions as well. But Matthew Stafford was on pace last year to throw about 5,000 yards, 38 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions, so that's huge. Now, granted, that was an 8-game sample size, so not a small sample size, but also not a full 16 seasons, but we kind of know what Matthew Stafford is. Matthew Stafford was awesome, like a top 10 quarterback annually when he had Calvin Johnson. After he lost Calvin Johnson, it kind of took like this Kenny Galladay is turning the corner to being one of the best receivers in the NFL. He's actually the guy that you're going to talk about who could make that jump this year to being that elite, DeAndre Hopkins and Michael Thomas, that kind of leap. It's Kenny Galladay. He's the guy that all the stats point to. He could be the dude that jumps into that conversation. The thing is, he's going pretty high in drafts. He's not following anybody. Nobody thinks he's a sleeper because everybody knows about Kenny Galladay, because even without Matthew Stafford last year, Kenny Galladay put up monster numbers, and he will put up monster numbers even more this year with Stafford. If we go just take the 8 games that he played last year, he would have got 1,280 yards and 14 touchdowns last year, assuming the production didn't drop from week 9 when Matthew Stafford didn't play and then all the way through the end of the season. But the first 8 weeks, that's what it would have projected out to. Marvin Jones, on the other hand, Marvin Jones is a sleeper because people are forgetting about Marvin Jones. He's going like well past 100 in ADP, and his draft stock is essentially, if Matthew Stafford would have played all 16 games, and again, I'm projecting here as if Stafford would have played those games and the production would have been similar to the first 8 weeks. Jones would have finished with 1,070 yards and 12 touchdowns. Now, do I expect 12 touchdowns? No, because there was that one game where he had 4 touchdowns against the Minnesota Vikings, which happened to fall in that window with Matthew Stafford. So that's going to happen. If that happens once a year, that's a lot. So I don't expect that to happen probably in the rest of Marvin Jones' career. But he is productive with Matthew Stafford there, and Matthew Stafford is more productive than the other quarterbacks, so he's able to kind of create 2 fantasy-relevant receivers, which I think people are not going to realize because of, first of all, where Matthew Stafford is going in drafts ADP-wise. I want Matthew Stafford. He is my favorite quarterback sleeper this year. So if I have a choice, I would take Mahomes, Jackson, right? But if those guys don't fall to me at a reasonable spot, because running back is going to be so thin this year, you're going to want to try to take those running backs early. But if I get my first 2 running backs and in the 3rd round, Jackson is there or Mahomes, and depending on what kind of league I'm in, because I like to play in a lot of deeper leagues, I'll take one of those guys. But if I don't get one of those guys, I'm passing on quarterback all the way to the bottom because of Matthew Stafford. Because Matthew Stafford is coming off as a quarterback 2, but I think he's going to project more like a quarterback 1. I project him similar to where I would project Matt Ryan. So if you want a comparison of where Matt Ryan's going and what I think Matthew Stafford will be, it's going to be very, very close. Now, I would rather have Matt Ryan, but it's very, very close for that comparison. So I would just pass on Matt Ryan and just wait for Matthew Stafford later in the draft and get me some players like receivers, running backs, fill up those positions at that draft capital. So again, I really, really like Marvin Jones this year because I mean, even if you just look at the targets and receptions, like Marvin Jones during the 8 weeks that Matthew Stafford was there actually had more receptions than Kenny Galladay. He had fewer targets, but not by much. So again, Marvin Jones is going to be that wide receiver 2 guy that he's a safe option for you. And I'll be drafting him, I'm sure, in a lot of leagues. And then there's Danny Amendola, who's playing decent in PPR leagues, but he's kind of off my radar because the addition of Deandre Swift means that the running backs are going to catch the ball out of the backfield. I'm not going to count on Kerryon Johnson and Swift being hurt because I think if Kerryon Johnson played a full season last year, he would have been more involved in those short passing games. Now, Swift, again, is a better receiver, so I think that the running back position will be heavily involved this year. And we've seen in the past that Stafford does like to throw the ball to his running backs. Now, they did draft TJ Hawkinson in the first round of 2019, so you'd assume this being his second year that he's going to be more involved in the passing game as well, although Matthew Stafford's never really had much luck with tight ends, so I won't be drafting him, but I would expect for his uptick in production to eat into Danny Amendola's production there. The other thing I want to point out about this, because I said I definitely want to draft Stafford. I would love to get Kenny Galladay, but I think he's going to be going at a reasonable price where I'm not going to be in the wide receiver market during that phase of the draft. But I want Marvin Jones. I will take Kerryon Johnson because I think Kerryon Johnson will be more productive than Deandre Swift throughout the whole season. So a lot of these guys like DeAngelo Williams, if you heard me say I think DeAngelo Williams will be more involved early in the year, where CEH is going to be involved late in the year, right? So this is not one of those scenarios. I think Kerryon Johnson is the lead back all year this year. I do think Deandre Swift gets involved, and he gets more involved towards the end of the year, but Kerryon Johnson will be the lead back all the way through. So let's take a look at what the fantasy playoff schedule looks like. So it's Packers, Titans, and Bucks. And while that might not be an amazing, this is a super easy schedule, we do not see any like powerhouse defenses on this. So like when I'm looking at players like Detroit Lions, they got a relatively easy in the season schedule. Now the Bucks are elite at stopping the run, but they're also awful at stopping the pass. So that might be one of those things that you got Stafford. You got a guy that you can trust in the playoffs, assuming the rest of your team is built solid. And I don't think that you're going to have a problem making the playoffs due to Matt Stafford. You might miss the playoffs due to other reasons, but it's not going to be because you got Matthew Stafford as your quarterback. That's it for today's show. I can't thank you guys enough for listening in on this stuff. I just love making fantasy football videos. Let me know in the comments if you got any ideas that you want me to talk about different teams or different positional battles. I'm open for business. So be sure to like and subscribe. And until next time, see you guys.